Happy first full week of daylight saving time. We're going to discuss that. Who likes it, who doesn't. Wes, it was tough getting up this morning, man. I do the morning shift over here in Birmingham, and my 2 o'clock alarm ended up being what my body's used to as 1 o'clock. So I was very confused, very out of it for a while, but we're going to make it through.
Yeah, I can imagine that, and the whole going to bed when the sun is still up really stinks.
For a long time, I actually had those, the masks you can wear.
The beauty rest
Yeah, the
masks.
Muty mask. I had that for a little while back when I first started on mornings, but I've since gotten rid of that. But yeah, we just kind of get used to it. A lot of people probably excited that the sun goes down a little bit later, though. You actually have a life after work.
I'm excited as well. It stays warmer, or it's getting warmer, stormier, all that fun stuff.
All that fun stuff, everything that comes with March. So here's what we're talking about, which, by the way, Wes and everybody out there, it's our 10th episode. We've made it 10.
Wow.
Not that anyone can cancel us because we're kind of in charge of this, but still getting viewership, and this is our 10th one on March 10th.
I was just thinking the same thing. 10 on 10.
That's a good sign, right? Good
Oh
omen.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So severe weather season ramps up. We'll talk about who sees it most from a climatology perspective for this time of year. We already talked a little bit about the time change. I was very curious. I did some digging on the history of standard time and daylight saving time versus standard time. And it actually has been a tug of war for a long time. So just a couple notes on that. And hey, we got a lunar eclipse this week.
Oh, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. We do have an eclipse. I can always count on you for the astronomical anomalies.
Yeah, I get excited about that, but I did actually forget about this one amidst everything else. But we'll dive into that, moving forward. But you mentioned it being springtime and severe weather season, West, something that we're both very familiar with. And last week we had a little bit of that. I'm not sure how you fared
Yeah.
up there outside of the winds, but from a standpoint of reports, we had a handful, at least across the deep south, from Texas over to Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas last week.
We had a threat for some severe weather. Didn't happen. Well, we did have the threat, and we also did have some severe weather. So let me backtrack. But it wasn't tornadoes, damaging wind gusts from thunderstorms. It was different. I'll dive into that in a little bit. It looks like
Yeah,
Birmingham just had just got covered with wind.
we did, but similar to you, Wes, a lot of our most damaging winds were not from storms, which is not a very common thing, which is why we're talking about it this week. It's called gradient winds. But the storm reports, this is from all of last week, and where you're seeing the blue W's, this is an imported KML file, but those are wind reports, a handful of tornado reports, but really this was a big wind event, a lot of wind energy with it. There was a few hail reports there as well. So here's by the numbers total this past week: 27 tornado reports, 464 wind reports. How about that? Handful of hail reports, about 32. We don't get a lot of hail down here this time of year. Do you guys, or is that a little bit later in the season for you?
I mean, it is kind of a decent setup for hail because the freezing level is lower, but we usually don't start getting hail until April.
Yeah, ours is really a toss up. A lot of times our atmospheric profile is a little too saturated all the way up to have any hail. You want that drier pocket so that raindrops can cycle and ice and freeze and coalesce. But we a lot of times don't get that. We might have a chance though in the southeast this upcoming weekend. We'll discuss that as well. But 523 total reports the past week, and I broke it down by our states, our DMAs here.
Thank you.
This is misleading, Wes, especially based off of what data you sent me. One storm-related wind report, one hail report in Kansas. I think those are both outside of your DMA, though.
Probably they're probably like either in Topeka, Wichita, or something like that. Yeah, so we ended up having some damage reports, but the way that these are filtered out is if the damage does not come from a thunderstorm, they're not really considered to be a storm report. I don't know if your weather office handles that differently, though, Evan. So, like, were those 63 gradient wind damage or like storm wind
So
damage?
these are all from the SPC, so storm
Okay.
related. But oddly enough, a lot of these wind damage reports came with winds that were sub severe, so they didn't have a severe thunderstorm warning on it. I do have the numbers on those though. I want to start with yours because you sent me this. So explain what you had here with these peak gusts.
So we had about 3 to 6 hours of wind gusts of 50 to 70 miles per hour.
Good
Um,
grief!
and let me preface this with I hate saying things like this, and I hate hearing people say things like this. But this was kind of like having a tropical storm or a nor'easter come through because they're all areas of low pressure. They all bring heavy precipitation, big changes in the weather, and sustained strong winds. Where we had sustained winds of 30 to 45 miles per hour, again, for like 3 to 6 hours, even actually longer than that, especially for the lower end. And then for 3 to 6 hours, we had wind gusts of 50 to 70. We even had a report of 85 mile per hour wind gusts, which the National Weather Service wasn't really able to corroborate super well, so they didn't feel comfortable putting it out there. But I mean, there was at one point about 60 to 70,000 people without power, but it was about a 6 hour period in which you generally had 30 to 60,000 people without power at any time. But whenever they would turn some back on, the lights would go off for somebody else, and so it just like kept rolling and rolling with power outages all over the place. Um, Leading up to this, we had about an inch of rain. So the ground was saturated. Then the wind came, and then the snow came, and then it got down to 25 the following morning. And so it was slush on the roads and just wet roads at first. Then it all froze, and the roads became totally icy. So it was just a huge, huge mess. That was the middle of the week, the Tuesday and Wednesday.
Yeah, that's a tough thing to
School was
like
canceled.
explain to people too. Like hey, it's not, there's not a storm out there. It's not raining. It's not at least for here. But the winds might gust up to 70 miles an hour. By the way, did the surface low track right over you guys?
It, yes, it did. It tracked right over us because there was a period kind of earlier in the day, so like Tuesday afternoon, in which the wind was really calm. So that's like the eye of the storm, if you will, relatively speaking, was right on top of us. And then once it started to move away, the winds increased again as we kind of got between the area of high pressure and low pressure. So we got into the gradient. I was getting 5 to 7 minutes, 5 to 8 minutes total time to do the weather throughout a 30-minute show. I really still didn't have enough time to just tell everybody like what all was going to happen because it was from severe weather to flooding to icy roads to power outages. It was a lot going on.
Yeah, we were in coverage here for basically a sub severe line of storms that came through, but we covered it anyway. And I remember we took the wide view at one point, and it was just a classic mid latitude cyclone. You had the snow wrapping around the low, which was at the time was getting into parts of Iowa, northern Missouri, Nebraska, and then you had the lead edge. It was coming through Alabama and Georgia. I mean, just a typical sign of what we see this time of year. But um, I had a similar like issue as far as like communicating this because we were under a wind advisory, as was like most of the country. I mean, did you see the advisory map that was in place? On was it? I guess it was Tuesday. Throughout there was high wind warnings. There was wind advisories. I mean, everywhere.
Oh yeah, we were in a high wind warning. It was really odd because we were put in a high wind watch, and we get those every few years. So it was just kind of odd to see. Sometimes it'll just go from an advisory to a warning. Very rarely a watch, but I know it was like 50% of the country was probably in some sort of wind product.
Yeah, a lot of wind energy with this. These are notable gusts that were in our area, and I just grabbed the top five, but there's a ton that are in that 40 range. But these are all at airports, ASOS, AWAS, or Mezzo stations, and these happened during the day, like leading up to. And we ended up, from what I gathered, and I kind of went off the Weather Prediction Center's local storm reports product, 97 reports from wind that had nothing to do with storms. The sun was out. It was just really windy. And it was really hard to communicate to people that the most dangerous winds were actually going to come before a line of rain came through here. And when the line of storms came through, we had 18 severe thunderstorm warnings issued for central Alabama. Not one of them verified. It was actually one of the worst verifications here in quite some time. But
Huh.
yeah, it was one of those things where we talked about, but the line had fallen below severe limits. I think the highest gust recorded as the line came through was 48 miles an hour, and that actually was in Tuscaloosa. But 97 reports while it's partly cloudy outside. It was the weirdest thing ever, and we had trees. I have a tree down in my yard right now. We lost our
Uh,
fence.
ooh.
Yeah,
Oh, those are not cheap. Trees are
no,
not cheap to get rid of.
yeah, we got an estimate coming on that, so prayers welcome. But it's a good reminder that gradient winds or winds that aren't associated with thunderstorms or a line, we always attach dangerous wind to a cell or a QLCS of storms. But this proved to be a day where you didn't need that. And people were kind of confused when the line came through and we were saying, hey, the winds with this are lesser than they were when it was partly cloudy today. It's a hard thing to, I guess, like digest.
Yeah, because it like goes against the complete opposite of what usually happens in the situation. And so it's like just rain. I would like to kind of understand at some point, like why sometimes you have windy events, and then even when thunderstorms come through, they're not able to bring down the wind from the mid levels, and sometimes they are. It's kind
Yeah,
of
that's
weird
a,
to
that,
me.
that's a good point because a lot of what we look at from a modeling perspective is what are our winds doing at like 850 millibars, so a couple thousand feet off the surface, and if the winds are howling in there with the right profile, they're translated to the surface, and you have strong wind gusts. But that doesn't always come to fruition. That can be tough. We had a ton of wind energy. I think we almost had too much shear with this system, and our winds aloft were over 100 knots, but our winds at the surface, it was almost too much shear. It just caused everything to fall apart. But it was a weird setup, one that was tough to relay, and not one that I've been a part of before.
Huh. The only thing that comes to mind about the whole wind being brought down from storms or not is if they are rooted shallow, then the storm structure isn't getting up there where the winds are. If if the parcel is lifted and then the shear is just cutting it off, then the storm is not tall enough to stay in the environment of strong winds. Like, okay, that makes sense. But then how are the strong winds then getting down to the surface if even the storm can't get up there?
That's good food for thought. I think you might have another topic. I know one of the things that we lacked was we didn't have any vertical like structure to these. So none of our storms were able to get very tall because it wasn't unstable. There was kind of warm air aloft versus colder. So um, that's a good thing. Remember that one. Take a note right now so
Huh.
we don't forget some weather brain stuff coming your way in future episodes. Um, I wanted to touch on this briefly, Wes, before we move on to
Yeah.
the forecast. But so this was the SPC outlook that was issued, and they expanded the enhanced risk area, which is the orange. That's a level 3 out of 5 to include Alabama late in the day. Well,
Mhm.
it had just not destabilized it all, and a lot of people were having a hard time understanding why the SPC expanded that and thus expanded their tornado threat. This is the tornado probability from that same day, same outlook, and they extended the tornado threat further north and east, and the damaging tornado threat. That's a hatched area you're seeing there. That's a 10% probability of EF2, EF5, so strong tornadoes and several of them, and it just didn't end up verifying. And being on the air, I'm answering all these comments of viewers who were concerned of what we're going to have. And you look at where that hatched area was, and there was a couple tornado reports, but not to the level, and certainly not in Alabama at all. But having to communicate with all this data out there is tough, and you don't ever want to go against another weather entity because you're all trying to work together. But there's so many very easily grabbable data sets for people, including what the National Weather Service office puts out in your local, in Kansas City, here in Birmingham, and people look at all different stuff. So then they're trying to figure out what's the most accurate. Why are we not all on the same page? That's a question I got. was why are you guys all saying different stuff?
The biggest thing that stands out for me from just the regular like categorical outlook of like marginal, slight, enhanced, when you compare that to the storm reports, is like from Memphis down the Mississippi River and then east and west of it, there is nothing. Like because it's supposed to be the chance of something occurring within a 20 with a point within 25 miles of it,
Yes.
and like literally nothing happened in that area. And there was a 2% tornado risk here in Kansas City, and we'll get put in these 2% tornado risks like so frequently to the fact that it's kind of like you're somewhat crying wolf on the tornado risk, because sometimes like it will hit. Sometimes the 2% tornado risk legitimately will hit. And so I guess I don't know. One out of every 50 times, yes, I guess that means
It,
it will hit. But when you're constantly in it, it's just like it's really tough to take believe. Okay, there you go. Yeah, like the enhanced and the slight that goes up through Memphis and into the Delta, like nothing happened there.
and I think for me, what I've come to do, and this is not great, but this is how I've interpreted this graphic. Where I see marginal, I see a thunderstorm threat. Where I see slight, I take in what used to be marginal. That's where I put that. And then the enhanced risk might be the best threat, but I didn't see that as an enhanced risk day. Certainly not for us. I didn't follow Louisiana and Mississippi's dynamics and thermodynamics as closely, but it certainly was a tough message to convey because you've all got to fall kind of in this line, and whether you say one thing or the other, this is a public graphic, and I got people sending me the screenshot of the discussions from the Storm Prediction Center and sending them to me terrified. And I said, okay, well, they look at everything on a national level. You got to follow kind of your local office. But another thing that was just really tough to get out there, and I had a hard time doing it because we're on the air for an hour, and we didn't go actually on TV. We stayed on um, YouTube. We just streamed live because people wanted to know. But it was a hard thing to convey because we're talking about a line of subsevere storms coming through and saying, "Hey, we're on the air for this, but the most dangerous winds have already come through. These are just has rain and some thunder with it." So
Yeah, I guess when people's attention has already been grabbed by all these different maps, it's the least that you all can do to cover it and be like, hey, the storms are coming through, but they're really not that bad. Like you're at least you're providing that comfort or coverage for people.
and that's what it ended up being, is saying the best part is I'm running the radar and I'm saying, okay, you're clear from this point west, or if I draw this line, you're clear over here, and just basically clearing people out. But there was a big concern about tornadoes all the way through this, even though we never really here at our station conveyed a tornado threat. It was in the graphics that were sent out to the public. It was in the National Weather Service wording. It was in the SPC wording. So I understand people's frustration. You've got all these weather entities, granted coming from different people, but messaging different things. And I'd be mad if, we were going to get, I don't know, a product at the store and there's, an info list saying, okay, here's what this product can do. Here's the warnings. Then there's another part that's like, well, actually, it's frustrating. I understand it, but something we'll have to deal with, I'm sure, as we head into the spring.
Oh yeah, we're only going to be seeing more of these outlooks.
Yeah. So speaking of that, before we get into who's hot and who's not, since it is that time of year,
Yeah,
this is a look at the probability of any type of severe weather. So winds, hail, tornadoes, going back to 1982. So this is a window from 82 to 2011 studied. And of course, there's several years unaccounted for, but this was a good chunk that I was able to grab and just kind of show the Southeast. We've talked about this, Wes, that we have different severe weather seasons. We tend to warm and start to see spring-like temperatures come back here sooner. And so that clash in the systems will get the severe threat across the Southeast. And, for tornado probabilities, very similarly, bullseye over Mississippi and Alabama for this week. So this is the week of March 11th. So if you're going to have severe weather, odds are, at least over that stretch from 82 to 2011, is it's going to be there. So you got to wait a little bit later. You guys, April and into May is when your numbers really peaked, and we'll have that on a later episode.
yeah. Late last year, it was late March through late May. It was the busiest severe weather season in about 30 years, so it makes sense that it would last 3 months instead of maybe like the usual two in terms of like really heavy traffic, severe weather. But all those severe probabilities starting off at the south is because the jet stream, as the equator starts to warm up, the jet stream will start to lift further up to the north. And then that means the storm track will take storms further north into the Midwest. And then that's why you'll see the upper Midwest has their tornado and storm season like May, June ish.
Yeah, and we're by the end of May into June, we're winding down here in Alabama because we don't the fronts don't get this far south. But if you're in South Dakota, your season might just be starting. There's tornadoes in June, in the upper plains. So um, the severe season's not equal in all areas, and hopefully we can get our good buddy Greg Nordstrom on to talk about
Yeah.
severe weather. He's your severe weather expert. That's who you want to be asking your questions to.
I want to ask him about snow ratios as well. There is one lesson that I have tried so hard to try and find like his presentation from about snow ratios that I would like to get from him.
I
We
think I actually have that. It's funny you bring that up. I had an old external hard drive. Actually, I won't pull it up here, but I might be able to get that over to you because I got a 40 on a quiz for snow ratios, and like not once, but multiple times. And I remember staying after, and Greg explained it to me because that was such a difficult thing. But yeah, he's got great stuff. His forecasting tips, solid, solid
were
stuff.
talking about the Dakotas. Was like North Dakota or Montana the cold spot, the coldest spot?
No, it was not. Glad you bring that up because I was
No,
actually well. I wasn't surprised by all of this. I was surprised by part of it. So who's hot? Who's not?
who's on fire?
Yeah, who's on fire? Who's completely frozen? All right. So first off, they are
Wow,
over 2,000 miles apart.
wow.
It was Maine and Texas. Now, this is not a first time showing for McAllen, Texas. This is actually its second time making this list. It is the first time for Van Buren, Maine. Here's
That
a fun.
had to have been a record for McAllen.
I did not look to see if it was a daily record.
I'll
Quite
look it up.
possibly it could have been. I
I'll look
was
it
more
up.
fascinated by the fact that if you go 10 miles south of McAllen, Texas, you're in Mexico. And if you
Yeah,
go 10 miles north or east of Van Buren, Maine, you're in Canada. So this is on the fringes. Isn't that funny? Like,
that is pretty funny.
almost not even in the country. But yeah, it was very hot. It's hard for me to fathom that there's a place of 103 degrees on a day where we were about 65. So anyway, that's your who's hot, who's not. So
That yeah,
speaking of
it's almost like you weren't even in America.
no, you basically weren't. I mean, literally, you could probably throw a baseball from the airport and get close to the Mexican border there. And Van Buren, I believe, is separated by some sort of water tributary from Canada. So very close, but
Did you say it was 102 or 103 in McAllen?
103. So you can do the math on that
96
one.
was the record.
Was the record?
It was 96.
They
So this,
shattered it. That's not even
I
close.
was gonna say 100 degrees is pretty hot, even for McAllen, Texas, in
Yeah.
March.
So there you have it. So who's hot this week? Dive into the numbers here, and Wes, as
Are
we've
you? Are
talked
you
about.
all? We're like 75 degrees for 3 days this week. Maybe like four.
Oh,
It's gonna be sweet.
so what this map is
Oh,
showing us is above average temperatures in the nation's heartland, below average across Florida, which is interesting because they've been pretty warm. The West Coast and even parts of New
McAllen,
England.
Texas is about to be a hot spot for
Yeah,
the
it
second week in a
is.
row.
Look at this. This is Friday evening. Look at that.
Yes,
Minneapolis, Omaha, bullseyes. Huge temperature departures or huge jump from normal. And eventually that
yes,
slides our way
and
late in the week.
eventually, and that's severe weather.
Yeah, I know, right? So here's just a look at the European model. Let's go to Wednesday at about 3. So 60s, 70s. This is ranges, and this is lower resolution model, but yeah, definitely calling for a plume of warm air. You can see it coming there.
Coming up there from McAllen, where that's
Yeah,
like
from
not like 90 to 100 again. I see it down there.
gallons down here. Hold on, let's just pixel query this bad boy.
90s.
90s.
Yeah, I bet if it can get to 100, it'll set another record.
Look at that. Lows in the 80s. That's nuts.
That's
About
not the
70s
desert.
high.
That's like tropical.
Yeah. Friday. 60s, 70s, all the way up into, you know, Illinois. I mean,
I
that's
think we'll be Kansas City will be in the 70s on Friday. It may be a little early in the afternoon, but I mean Thursday and Friday like 75 to 80 degrees here, and then we'll have another really big storm system come through that is probably not going to bring us much severe weather, but it'll bring us a bunch of wind again.
yeah, you guys are the hot spot for wind, I guess. So let's talk
Yeah.
about the
March and
um,
April are the two windiest months of the year for Kansas City. So we're just doing the normal gig with
that's a
that, I suppose.
fun fact. I did not know that. So there you go. You're not getting that anywhere else on a weekly basis. Thank you, Wes. This is the GFS
I've had to do the data deep dives.
product. I love fun facts. I tried to brand Fun Fact Friday at one point and couldn't get everybody behind it. But there are so many fun facts in weather. So anyway, pretty quiet here. The first half of the week, we got this little weak shortwave disturbance is going to form here in the middle of the country, well over Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas. By Thursday, we're going to get a lot of showers, maybe a few thunderstorms. Not a lot of support with this one. Out west, we get tons of snow for the Rocky Mountains, Sierra Nevada mountains, more rain for Los Angeles, San Diego. Um, I mean, they went from wildfires to just torrential rains.
Are you
And
all still in a drought? Or not in a drought, dry?
yes, we're in an abnormally dry. 62% of the state actually is in some level of drought, but of that, 57% is just in that D0 category. So we have improved greatly in that regard.
Did you just look those numbers up in the last 24 hours?
Nope, I did a breakout last week. So here's a look at
I was
the.
going to say, how do you know those exact percentages so well?
No, I did a breakout on it last Friday. So there is actually, I believe, 67 or 68% of the country is in some level of drought.
Okay.
It equals about 142 million people in the United States that in the contiguous United States. Um, sorry, Alaska and Hawaii.
Thank you for specifying.
It's we have no hate towards them, none at all. But the
Jealousy, actually, for the Hawaiians. This is what we have.
yeah, they got some great weather. But yeah, this is compared to this exact week last year. 47% of the country was in a drought. This year, 67% of the country in a drought. And as I mentioned, over 140 million impacted by that. The good news for much of Alabama, I mean, this is that dry category. This can be wiped out no problem. You guys look pretty similar. You have a couple, moderate spots there. Real issue appears to be up in Nebraska, the Dakotas, where you have that extreme drought. And then, of course, out here, you have that exceptional or extreme drought for Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Las Vegas, and Southern California. Although I think things will be changing in Southern California with all this rain.
I just realized that I got you out of order there. I didn't realize we had drought there toward the end because we never really went through the severe weather. So let me bring something back here. The wind that's coming up is out of the southwest, and so where that drought is probably has a bunch of dirt, dust, and junk with it. And so as our rain comes up on Friday, it may have a little bit of, I've heard it called muddy rain, but like muddy rain, dirty rain, there's like dirt within the raindrops that when it rains on your car, it leaves some of those splotches all over you. So yeah, so that rain that comes up there on Friday evening, you can kind of see those streamlines going up through Dallas and Oklahoma. So that's the wind, the air coming up, meeting with the moisture, and blah, dirt falls on your car.
So you've got all of this. What you were saying is, if your winds are coming from the southwest, you've got all of this really, really dry nonsense here. If that's flowing in, it'll like coalesce, and you'll actually have like dirt in the rain.
Exactly.
Interesting. Another fun fact from West. Man, you're 2-0.
The same things just happen kind of over and over again around here. So You live in the same place for five years or so. It eventually kind of happens over and over again. That I think that happened also in like Oklahoma last week, because I got a video on TikTok where like 2 years ago I talked about the dirty rain, and it started getting a bunch of likes randomly. And so I think this is kind of a Midwestern wide thing that's been happening over the last week or two, where we've been in this drought, and so the rain is dirty.
Interesting.
I feel like you guys don't have that problem.
No, we've not. Not that I'm aware of. Usually we are so. I mean, we get a lot of our winds are coming off the Gulf, and we don't really have a sandy, dusty landscape anywhere in Alabama. We're dominated by pine tree farms and stuff like that. So we don't typically have that as a potential issue. But speaking of issues here, this is the one. This secondary low I think is going to form here, Wes, unfortunately. So I'm going to be at work on Saturday. Um, Pretty far out, but yeah, this is nasty stuff here. Surface low potentially right about here is where I'd put it. So when you have that secondary low here, you got winds, out of the south. The surface really really strong jet in this direction. We're going to have some decent instability as well. This could be a pretty big tornado maker if these scenarios verify. It's still a ways out, but it's probably the most concrete threat I've seen in you know quite some time here in Alabama. So
So you're
I guess
talking about that area of low pressure.
yeah.
Um, that is kind of a big deal for our chance of severe weather on Friday, in which the GFS model, which you're just showing, has a low wave further north, and like every other model, has it further off to the south. The GFS may have actually gotten no, it's still doing the same thing. And so the GFS doesn't really give us good severe weather because it brings in dry air. Meanwhile, the other models have a lower further off to the south, and so the dry air doesn't come in.
Ah,
And so I'm wondering if like the GFS is doing something similar with y'all's chance of severe weather, but at least the upper level low looks like it's way further.
it's way,
Way,
way, way off. So, like in my noon broadcast I just did, I actually drew on a surface map, much better than this. I'm just kind of messing around with the telestrator, but here's your,
yeah,
the low. I think what will happen is you're going to get your secondary low that's going to form somewhere. Now according to these, surface winds, they've got it back here a little bit further. Actually, these are 850-mile-an-hour winds, 850 millibar winds. Um, Back here further to the west, I have it somewhere just like in this range, and that's going to give us more uplift and more support dynamically. It also probably helped bring in a more unstable air mass to us here, because initially, I saw, hey, here's your front, but the low's way up here. We're going to be
yeah,
okay, but
yeah. But you're
lots.
not. I see what you're saying now. Yeah, like around like 18Z Saturday, a little service low develops right near Louisiana, Arkansas, and
Yep. Let's see what the Euro has for theirs. Again, there's so your surface low in this case with the Euro is a little bit further to the south, is what you were just saying.
right.
So that could have certainly implications. But then as we move ahead into Saturday,
So it's the same thing. It looks like
yeah,
your models are on the same page for you all.
yeah. So
That's nice.
I mean, I don't. We're splitting hairs with us. I think we have the setup for it. So we'll go to the SPC outlooks here for the week. That little disturbance I showed early on, they got a marginal risk for this. I'd be surprised if we'd see anything. Maybe some stronger convective thunderstorms with perhaps some hail. I don't really see. By the time it gets to us, we won't have anything. But we get to Thursday and then Friday. There we go. That's the day before. So you guys kind of get skipped over. The day 4, there's nothing. Day 5, we've got something, but it's just to the east. I guess this puts your eastern counties west in that
Yeah,
threat, though.
yeah, and this may kind of go back to our previous discussion on the SPC, in which if you are favoring one type of weather model or like one suite of weather models. It has implications on what your overall forecast is and like overall outlook of what the severe threat will be. And so, last week, if they were putting out these outlook maps that just unfortunately didn't line up with what everybody else was thinking, like this may be a similar case. I do think overall, yes, the better chance of severe weather is south and east of Kansas City. But I mean, I think like completely um, not having Kansas City included in this is a little, it's favoring one model solution over the others. I will say that. And this isn't the first time or season that's happened. It's just kind of what happens whenever you get a bunch of different people with different thought processes.
And it is a lot of people. It's a think tank, and they put out these outlooks. Notice how there's only two categories here versus if I go to the day 3, it's 1 through 5. They do that for a reason because we look at patterns that far out versus specifics, and so maybe that will change. Hopefully, it does not for you. For us,
Thank
I
you.
would love for it to change, but I don't think it will. Here's Saturday for us. So I mean, we're pretty much in the bullseye of this. That thirty
Yeah.
percent or greater,
Yeah.
and so
Do you agree? Are you liking that forecast? Not like I guess do you like it, but does it line up with your thinking?
so far I agree. Here's my one critique on this: unless it's a absolutely decades changing setup, why not go with just the 15% outlined area? Because I rarely ever see, and it's hard to do this in anything, but go back, like dial it back. Like once you've issued something of some significance, it's really hard to trim that back or lower that threat. You've already put it out there. So we're already at an enhanced risk for the weekend for Saturday.
Yeah.
If the parameters don't line up, if we see something change with the timing, if that surface low doesn't develop, if there's a further northerly track to it, if we don't see return flow, there's a lot of things that could happen. It may not be an enhanced risk. So my only critique with this far out is, put us in that 15%. That's enough to get people's attention. But to go ahead and put it in that 30% or greater, especially how things have verified to this point, that's really my only thing. But it certainly looks like it's going to be one of our more concrete threats that we've had here in quite some time. So I don't really have any major issues with it. I just sometimes inch forward. It's like when we're forecasting, if I see a huge change in what I had the day before, I might initially move it up, a degree or two, or change the percentage of rain by just a little bit. If
Yeah.
I change it by a ton and then I go back, people are confused. So I tend to incrementally or like in a small margin increase or decrease. But we've already kind of put it out there. It's a high threat, and I wouldn't be surprised if they put this in a higher category moving forward. So lots to watch. It is March.
Let me show you
March.
something real quick. Just so I like this website because it pretty much will just tell you what the SPC is going to issue. Do you know what
Look
this
at that.
is?
Look at that.
It's the machine learning website. Yeah, like it matches up very well with what they're out looking in. So yeah,
That's our DMA.
that is. All right,
If you
back
need,
to you.
if you need to find me on Saturday, I will be at the TV station for sure. We'll end the forecast with this here. I'll just pop this up as we kind of talked about a little bit about the drought monitor already. I kind of shared the numbers, but just show you these are the rainfall totals. And QPF is a tough thing to figure because these will almost never verify to the exact. But what it tells me is
Yeah.
we're going to get a lot of rain over the southeast. We're going to see a lot of rain over the Tennessee Valley. And that's all I need to see from a forecasting standpoint to know that we're going to have some impactful rains. Will it vary from what this is saying? Probably. But I know we're going to get a lot of rain right in here with these two systems. It looks like with that big low that we talked about, where the precipitation will be kind of north of you, we'll get a lot of rain. Of course, we talked about the West Coast. System after system coming in there. You're talking 5+ inches for parts of Oregon,
Oh yeah.
Washington, Northern California. Um, very dry here, so you're going to keep getting that dirty rain, Wes, and you
There,
better deal with it.
wash. Keep on washing your car. Sponsored by Car Wash brand here.
And there's the drought. We'll see relief in the southeast, I'm sure. And of course, Southern California, that'll probably improve things a little bit moving forward. So it is spring. We tend to see a lot of systems come through. So this whole spring forward thing, it's got me on jet lag today for sure. What do you like? How we shift our times during the year, Wes?
Yes, but also I would like to see what it would be like if we didn't shift our times. I think that would be the best because it is kind of nice, maybe just going like to just have the sun up longer. I like using quotes here, have the sun up longer. Like it is nice to have one day be dark and the next one, like, sun's up a little later. We can do stuff outside in the evening, everything related to that. But I would like to experience a life, maybe just 1 year in which we don't have this time change.
I think so too, and this is one of those things I know people get really fired up about. I'll give my 2 cents. I would love for the sun not to go down. Our sunset time in December in Central Alabama is about 4:38. To give you an idea, middle school's not even out and home yet. There's bus routes going, and it's pretty much dark. And if it's a rainy or cloudy day, I mean, it basically is dark. So, um, I would love to see it stay rather than fall back, just
So then it would be
because that
5:38 if we don't have daylight saving time.
right. I think that's a fairly reasonable um, thing. And this has been a very hot topic for a lot. I didn't realize a lot of this, but it was adopted in 1918 in the United States. There's documents of this being used in Europe earlier than this, in Canada. It was repealed right after World War One, reinstated for energy purposes from 42 to 45. Again, repealed back. There was a multitude of changes in the 70s and 80s. There was an energy crisis where they implemented it. Did you know, Wes? And I didn't before looking this up. Daylight saving time actually used to start in January and in February. It flip flopped its timings multiple times in the 70s and 80s.
I wonder why.
There's a lot of information out there on it. Let's see.
Maybe it had something to do with like heating for winter, like it was tougher to supply the energy for winters, so they made it start earlier or something.
Yeah, it was started during the energy crisis in 1974, and it started on January 6th, um, and it went back and forth. It started in April in 1986, so we just really couldn't figure it out, get our ish together. And then finally in 2007, the Energy Policy Act that was, I guess, signed in '05 went into order, and that's what we have daylight savings as today. So it's the second Sunday in March now is always the start of daylight saving, and then of course we fall back November, the first weekend in November. So again, I'm kind of indifferent. I would like to see the sunlight later in the day versus earlier, and that's with me being in bed early for most of the year. So
Which one do you prefer? Do you prefer the effects of springing forward or falling back?
falling back because you get that extra hour you didn't know. This spring forward nonsense needs to take place on a Friday night, so I got 2 days to get used to it. I was like, oh my gosh, today. So
But then you could be at the bars for an hour
oh
longer.
gosh, the bars. I don't even know where those are anymore. The
Yeah,
kids and all these other things. So
my refrigerator is what it is.
though, Wes, this week, no bearing on the sunlight, but we have a total lunar eclipse. So a little astronomy minute here.
Yes.
This is a very basic way to look at it. A lot of things going on this morning, but Thursday night into Friday morning. So these are all in Eastern time. I know we're both in Central, but we have some people who watch us in Eastern. So I just kept it at Eastern time. But um, the total lunar eclipse doesn't really begin until about 1:30 in the morning for us, Wes, us here in Birmingham and you in Kansas City being in the same time, ending at about 2:30. So this will go for, it seems silly, but it only goes for about an hour, a little bit less. But it's going to be cool looking. It'll be red. Same reason that the sky is blue, it's just filtering out certain colors, but it'll look red. And if your cloud cover is good, which here we're going to have decreasing clouds as the rain's going to be moving on through, but should have a pretty good chance to see this all across North America given the right sky conditions. So Thursday
I
night,
think,
Friday
yeah,
morning.
I think we're good here too. I think we will have clear skies for all of this to see. And I am counting on getting pictures from people on this, and this will be a good little talking point, I think, for at least for me, because weather's super quiet other than Friday. We did have the aurora show up over the weekend. We had some clear
What? In
skies,
Kansas City?
and yeah, yeah. And I don't know if this is related to. Um, Here are the theories. Cameras are getting better. Our awareness of auroras is getting better, or the poles are like moving. I don't know if you ever heard of this or not, and I think this is true, but I can also be proved for that this is wrong. But that the poles will switch, like the north and the south pole will switch. They'll like rotate against one another, and so there's a theory that that is like slowly happening.
With the
And
sun you're
so,
talking about?
no, not with the sun, with like Earth's magnetic poles will move.
Oh, okay, okay.
And so there's theory that like the magnetic poles starting to move further off to the south, and so then your poles moving to the south. That means your reaction with the particles coming off the sun is more visible across the lower latitudes. So
Interesting.
all I have to say, cool stuff happening with the sky when it's clear around here lately.
Speaking of this guy, we talked, I think it was last week, I think, talking about the
Yeah.
visibility of
Yes. Go ahead.
telescopes. So I actually looked into that, and it was very interesting to find that yes, the thickness of the atmosphere absolutely plays a role when you have, for example, a warmer atmosphere down near the tropics. There's a lot more layering to go through, and it can usually the biggest problem is it'll just make stars blurry, planets grainy, just not very clear. Um, and so you want a thinner atmosphere to look through, which you had a great point. You were talking about, well, the telescopes, there's some in Hawaii, there's some in various places in Mexico at lower latitudes. Well, they're all high elevation. So I was looking at some of these are 10, 11, 12,000 feet up, these telescopes, and they're cited as being there because they're higher in the atmosphere. They cut off that lowest couple thousand feet that's dense, has pollution, and you start your viewing point, 10,000 feet up, and you're already seeing, much better. So thickness of the atmosphere does play a role in.
That was you. That was
Go ahead.
all. I thought about Hawaii, but no, that was you're the one that sniffed out the whole thickness thing. I would have like never considered that. So really, when you're in space, the stars are extra bright because there's no
Yeah,
atmosphere
you,
with
you
them.
have nothing. You're not seeing through anything. Your space is empty nothingness. Is why we call it space. Such a technical term there, but um, yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool thing. Along with this is our this week in weather history, Wes. This is interesting. A lot happening where you are. So, in on March 10th, Dodge City, Kansas, had a 24-hour snow total of 17 and a half inches, and as you've talked about back in February, your records for, I think, a 24-hour period where you were at were somewhere in that 12 to 15, 18-inch range, depending on where you were. But
Yeah,
in March, 17 and a half inches. That was 1922. 1948, also in Kansas, lows of negative 25 in Oberlin, Healy, and I don't know if I'm saying it right, Quinter,
that
Kansas.
not in my part of Kansas, so you can say whatever
Okay,
you want.
low of 15 in Dodge City, negative 11 in Concordia, negative 3 in Wichita were also March records. That was March 11th. And this one's fascinating, and I haven't been able to get any more info on it yet. But the record for longest surviving human tossed by a tornado took place in 2006. What a bizarre stat! You want to care to guess how far Matt Suter was carried in surviving by this tornado?
So probably 122 yards.
1,307 feet.
Uh, wow. What?
That was cited by the weather doctor's diary. So Um, I did not know that there was a going record kept of that. Um,
Was it
Apparently,
1,300 feet?
1,307 feet he was
That
carried.
is, it's like four to five football fields is what that is.
He had a head wound, some bruises, of course, but he survived. So that is not a stat I thought we'd come across, but that was this week in 2006. He was in a mobile home, and the side wall ripped out. So there you go, Wes. We say never be outside during a tornado. You don't want to go along for that ride.
That's nuts. It's like, would you land in a marsh? Like, I don't know where you have to land to be through that far.
Apparently, soft grass and an open field is all he needed. Tough guy, Matt.
That's pretty
Interesting.
nice. Sometimes I'll be doing these school talks, and I will get kids that ask me these like ridiculous questions, like,
Same.
"What's it like being in a tornado? Like, what happens if you get thrown by a tornado?"
What's it look like up there? Is it a
Yes,
dime?
yes.
Or I'll get
I'm like,
stories like my granddad had a tornado go right by his house and take away his truck, and I get all sorts of elaborate stories too. But hey, we were there once. But no, we do not know. Another one I get a lot is in Twister, the original. Do we launch all these little orbs into a tornado to study it? Which is interesting because tornado studies is something that we need more of so we can understand them. A lot still not known, but yeah, lots of interesting questions.
I think our favorite meteorologist though is doing that project soon. I think Reed Timmer is doing that project soon. Actually,
All
Dorothy.
right. Well, hopefully we can get more data. I would just like more accurate data to be coming out from certain people. So, all right, let's go to this. Usually our finale of the show, forecast competition. All right, Wes, this one's
Whoa, yo,
this
we
one was
missed the lows bad. Oh
a
my
lot. So
gosh.
couple things to cite here. First of all, both me and Wes, when you look at the average number, so we usually take the tiebreaker is usually if we don't hit both numbers, is the average of our two numbers. Well, our average was exactly the same, but the tiebreaker goes to Wes because he actually nailed the high at 78. What we both missed, Wes, was they were dealing with a cool front or a cold front, and the dew point was really low, like in the 40s. And so an area that normally doesn't dip, below 55 this time of year dropped to 52. Most of the models had it 58, 59, 60. And surprise, surprise. So Naples, nice and cool, 52 Saturday morning.
Man, I remember looking at this data, and I think I saw 56. And I was like, "That's really weird. It seems very cold
I
for."
went up. I saw the data and I went up. I was like, nah, you're by the Gulf. There's no way.
Yeah, exactly.
Another importance of knowing your environment, and I'm sure the local Mets there knew what to look for versus us. We were just kind of peeking in for a day. So, what about Peoria? Does that sound good to you?
Sure. I love me some good Midwestern weather.
No idea how this
Peoria.
came into mind. I was like looking around and I thought, oh, Peoria
Yeah,
sounds good.
somewhere in the middle of Illinois.
Yep,
Peoria.
I think it's like north central, but yeah, there we go. We'll do it for this upcoming Saturday, and we'll probably both forget until Friday, and thus be slightly more accurate.
Can I schedule it? Can I schedule you a text now and see if I can do that on my phone?
You
Because
need to. I'd remind you
you've
last
been
Friday.
telling me I can't.
Welcome.
I can't.
That's what we
But
do. Reach out to each other.
the
So
Saturday will actually be a really difficult forecast because of that area of low pressure coming in.
yep,
And again, there's two different beliefs held by the models right now. So if they
yeah.
don't come to any agreement, it's going to be tough for both of us.
Well, and we could be looking at a day of backwards temps where the high takes place in the morning and a
Yeah.
low late in the day. So I was looking at somewhere in that middle of the country where we'd be kind of battling that. So that's what I went with. It could be tough. We could absolutely, flounder this, but it'll be fun.
I think sometime we should do like Hawaii or Alaska, just like somewhere.
So they know we don't dislike them. It's a great idea.
Yeah, that too. Or just like neither of us literally have any experience forecasting at
I think it's a great idea. We'll do. You know what? You produce next week. You can pick one of the little islands. Pick up in Alaska. I think I'd have a harder time with Alaska than Hawaii, because you have so many different, you have, mountains, you have a really dry tundra, you've got the coasts. Hawaii is just a bunch of islands, as long as you're not forecasting for the tip of the volcano.
Let me let me see if there are any METAR stations in Hawaii other than Honolulu, and just pick one of those.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a plan. Some good stuff this week. We talked about a lot of good stuff, Wes.
Yeah, I have a feeling we'll be talking about similar things next week:
Yep.
severe weather, strong wind. Um, the other thing we made. Oh, why do some thunderstorms bring down strong winds and others don't? Look into that.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll reach out to Greg and see what his schedule's like. But love to have him on, even if we interview him at a different time and put it on here, because he truly is one of the greatest forecasters, and he's really specializes in the tropics and then severe weather. So be good stuff.
And it's funny that I am craving his lesson on snow ratios, and he doesn't even specialize in that. It speaks to his expertise
He's
level.
still great at it. If I find that file, which I think I have it right here on a thumb drive, I'm going to send it to you.
All right, please do. It'll make my snow forecast better. I'm sure of it.
I'm getting there. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a great week.